CIA is very good at what they do. They're the premier intelligence agency in the world for a reason. But you saw how ill-prepared we were for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. You saw how wrong we were about Russia's power as it invaded Ukraine. You saw how wrong we were about Hamas's capabilities to leverage long-term conflict with Israel. And in each of those cases, we theoretically had some kind of team that was a group of specialists that had been awarded a contract to prepare for exactly that event. Now all of a sudden people have to make the choice between what's the right thing to say versus what's the career benefiting thing to say. When you amplify that over the future of China and the future of Iran and the future of offensive cyber operations, how many of our friends are actually our enemies and we don't even realize it?
We're going to be governed by the mids, people who build our planes and ships and spacecraft. They have to make a bet on which buddy hire is the best hire. Like, what do you think has been the biggest error of the IC?
It's such a pit of vipers because
I want you to know, and I want everyone watching to know why I've been looking into this, and I found the perfect parable. I've heard at all the corporate leadership trainings that if different people blindfolded were all feeling an elephant at the same time, they would all report back very different things. Some who were grabbing onto the skin would say it's rough and scaly. Others would grab onto the tusk or the trunk or the tail. And the same exact animal that everybody was feeling would result in all of these different narratives and true beliefs that people would be saying reflective of their own experience. And in so many ways, that is the national security space in our country right now. It is, and you have been feeling the elephant as a CIA operative on the ground, and you have built an incredible following on YouTube and elsewhere where people are intrigued at all the tradecraft and all of the insights you've gained from that. But I have felt the elephant for 8 years on the House Armed Services Committee. And I sat on the subcommittee that dealt with emerging threats and cyber and the Defense Intelligence Agency and all the collaborations with the CIA. And so I was really pumped when I thought I would get to talk to you because I really want to go into some of the things that our country has experienced, the challenges that we face now, and talk about how we can connect the policymaker standpoint from the operative standpoint. So again, thank you. And I would love you, just for those in my audience who aren't familiar with your work, to say what you've done, who you are, and how you're now communicating about those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I have a partnership with Golden Crest Metals because gold is crushing it right now. I hear from listeners and viewers about how they've made a fortune riding this wave of investing in gold, moving your 401k or other assets into gold, and then you've got a stable asset. And with Golden Crest Metals, you have exactly the right partner to make sure that that asset is managed well. They can handle your gold, they can handle your silver. This thing is going to zoom past 3,000 an ounce, and it's going to the moon. So just America, you got to get this straight. The deep state, they're not taking Trump's victory lightly. They're furious, and because of that fury, it could be your savings, your retirement, in their crosshairs. Now, inflation is still very sticky right now, and the Federal Reserve is saying that 2025 could be even worse. Your 401k, your IRA, they're not protected in that dynamic. They could be next on the chopping block. Now, during President Trump's first term, gold soared over 50%. In 2024, it crushed the S&P 500, proving once again it's the ultimate safe haven in times of chaos. Silver, it climbed an impressive 23% last year. It's predicted to skyrocket in 2025. If you ever thought about protecting your money, now is the time to make that choice. And you want to make it with Golden Crest Metals. Right now, they're offering a free wealth protection guide to help you shield your savings with gold and silver. And you want to ride that ride up along with everybody else. Here's the kicker. You can get up to $25,000 in free silver with qualified purchases. So don't wait until it's too late. Call 833-752-2083 or visit goldencrestmetals.com now. That's 833-752-2083. The deep state's not going to wait. Everyone's going to make money in gold if you continue to see these trends over these last few years continue, and you want to be a part of it. So protect your savings, protect your future. Call Golden Crest Metals at 833-752-2083 or visit goldencrestmetals.com today.
My name is Andrew Bustamante. I'm a former CIA intelligence officer. I'm the founder of everydayspy.com, and you can find me all over the internet, interviewing with great folks, having some great conversations, exactly like what you're talking about today, Matt, because you're totally right. Anybody who has lived inside the national security infrastructure, anybody who's peeked behind that curtain, especially if you've looked at emerging threats, what we sometimes call over the horizon threats, the world is a much more dangerous place than what is painted for you when you walk down the street in middle America or when you watch the news, especially on any kind of standard liberal media.
No question about it. So at the outset, the perspective that someone in my shoes would have of somebody what you've done, we get back reports that say like, this is exquisite intelligence. This is intelligence with this type of a grading on its likelihood of being true, right? And so we receive a lot of those reports. And so I assume that somewhere there's a guy like you out there collecting HUMINT, and then there's a nerd somewhere collecting SIGINT, and all of that's being melded together by some sort of middle manager. And I don't say that as a pejorative. I've been a middle manager. And that is making its way to us. But what's kind of your take on how members of Congress and policymakers would ultimately make decisions? And then once we dissect that, we can go into how it actually happens.
Yeah, right. So it's interesting from the field officer point of view. What makes it to the policymaker isn't necessarily 100% accurate to what happens in the field. And that's an unfortunate but very significant reality, because intelligence is still a profession. It's still a career, which means that what you say, what gets recorded, what gets communicated, what gets prioritized, all impact your individual career. And that was not something I expected, Matt. When I signed up to be in the military, when I went on to join CIA, I felt like there would be a mission that would come first. But that wasn't always the case. There were careers that had to come first, and there were politics that had to come first, and things got muddled. So as an example, when a field officer collects an intelligence report, that intelligence report is what we call raw intelligence. It comes directly from a human source. And that intelligence report almost always starts the same way. On this day, this thing happened. And then you want your intelligence report to basically answer, the 5 major questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And you want to stick to the facts. So you report just the facts in this paragraph, and then you submit that paragraph or 2 or 3 paragraphs forward as an intelligence report. Well, when you write that intelligence report, you as the field officer were there. You write what you fucking heard. But then it goes through 3 levels of managers, and sometimes they're like, well, we're not sure we want to say that, or we're not sure we want to say it that way. Or we're afraid that if we say this line, it's going to turn the analysis team, it's going to make them come back with more questions. So now you've got people who are editing your raw intelligence before it can even be sent to the analytical department at CIA. And then once it gets to the analysts, now you've got a team of 5 or 7 analysts who, just like you said, they're pulling from expertise in all the different intelligence areas, right? SIGINT, MASINT, HUMINT, defense intelligence, whatever. And they're combining your raw intelligence with somebody else's raw intelligence and turning it into a synthesized product that gets passed to the policymaker. So when you received it, Matt, and it was rated as whatever it was rated as, that rating scale came from a team of analysts who had to agree on what they were going to rate it according to an index that was defined by some sort of bureaucratic process based on raw intelligence that had been fine-tuned by a series of middle managers before it actually came from the source. So as kind of frustrating as it is to
You must have resented the shit out of that.
Exactly.
Like, look, man, I didn't have the guts to go out there and throw a turban on and climb into some Central Asian cave. But if like people are out there doing that stuff on behalf of the CIA and they're saying what happened, and then some needle dick at some office in the Washington, D.C. area is saying, well, that actually doesn't fit the outcome determinative goal that we had, then it gets sanded off, watered down, re-aggregated, and then the effort put in becomes functionally meaningless.
And you're exactly right. And I'm glad that you could pick up on that so quickly, because that's what ends up creating a divide between the field operator and the policymaker that we're sworn to support. Because we don't ever know why the policymaker is making the policy decisions they're making, because not only is there the watered down version of the intelligence that we're collecting, but then there's also all the other competing political issues that are happening at any given time.
So the issue there is what animates that. What animates that process by which raw intelligence is altered, reorganized, recast, categorized before people making decisions about like not insignificant shit. You know, it's like whether or not we go to war and where we put bases and what level of risk of confrontation with some major power we're going to have over something going on. And what I know for an absolute fact from my time is that a lot of those folks preparing reports for us know that their career advancement is dependent on whether or not we like the report, whether or not we like the findings. And that should not be a factor in it. It should be whether or not it is true or false. And then the people who are voted for and against should have to carry that burden. But because a lot of them are cowards, they want to be able to have cover. And so they reward the people in the bureaucracy who provide them the cover to make bad decisions. And what I don't honestly know is whether or not that middle level who is ingesting the raw intelligence, whether or not they pass that pressure on. Like when you're out in the field, when you're the colleagues I'm sure you still talk to and have gotten out and you've talked to, have they ever felt that pressure? Because I've never really correctly assessed that.
Yeah, you know, it's this is a fantastic lens to look at the difference between the working kind of boots on the ground operator and then your, 7 to 15 year mid-careerist, because there's the length of time that you're exposed to operations starts to determine what level of impact you have on that operation. So the boots on the ground core collector, their job is to go out there just like a grunt in the military, right? Point and shoot. Do the thing that you were told to do. That's it. So they go out there, they're supposed to meet with a Taliban official, they're supposed to meet with, a North Korean or a Chinese or a Russian military general. They're supposed to meet with you name it and collect raw intelligence. So that's exactly what they do. The problem happens when they submit that up. So now as mid-careerists start to touch that product, those mid-careerists absolutely feel the pressure that you're saying of it has to be a report that does a couple of different things. It has to be a report that gets a positive grade because our reports get graded. They get graded by the analysts who then give you a score for how much you can rely on that.
Well, wait a second. Is that grade based on veracity and truthfulness, or is that grade based on whether or not your report will function as cover for some subsequent action?
It's in between. It's not based on the veracity of the report. It's based on how much the report aligns with the policymaker's priority of what should be reported on.
But you would agree that's totally fucked up, right?
I agree, totally. Because if I'm an expert in pursuing, say, Russian nuclear weapons, but the policymaker is really interested right now in what's the price of rice that's coming out of Bali, my report about Russian weapons shouldn't be discounted in terms of its grade just because the policymaker is interested in something else. And that becomes especially difficult when you have Congress changing every few years, you have presidents changing, you have financial priorities changing. Now all of a sudden you've got this cadre of skilled people hired for a reason who are jumping from topic to topic, just trying to build a career. And they don't like that, and that definitely doesn't make them better at serving the American people.
I actually think that's one of the things that animated the Russia hoax, is that you had a lot of these guys who were boomers who had rolled through in like the 80s and 90s, and Mandarin is a really hard language to learn, and they had built a career on this Cold War threat analysis, which at the time, I'm certainly grateful there were wonderful people to do that, but they wanted one last lick. And that last kind of batch of proteges of some of those great Cold Warriors also were saying, well, we want our great Cold War construct, and that then becomes the basis of everything we've done to encircle Russia, and then their horrendous attack on Ukraine and the like. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting something really important there, because what happens is in the intelligence infrastructure, in the national security infrastructure, you have these generational threats that kind of shape the senior ranking leaders of any given organization. So I was trained how to hunt and neutralize terrorists.
Yeah, global war on terror guy.
By a bunch of gray-haired Cold Warriors who knew nothing about terrorism. And then when I left the farm to go actually start my career, now Obama instigated the Asia pivot. And now everybody's very focused on what's happening in Asia, which is completely different than counterterrorism, which is, of course, very different than Cold War. So you see that even in the training pipeline, there's fundamental flaws, not to mention the politics of who gets sent to be a teacher. Because Matt, I don't know what you've seen in your shoes, at CIA and in DOD, oftentimes the people who are sent to the schoolhouse to cultivate the next generation of warriors are actually not the field warriors themselves. They're the people who are broken toys, who made mistakes in the field.
Well, isn't that all of education in America now?
It does feel like that.
Your 10th grade chemistry teacher wasn't about to resolve like nuclear fusion in their bathtub. You know, I mean, those who don't know teach is kind of an axiom. And another axiom is like the every great general is fighting the last war because of just what you've described throughout all of human history. You develop an expertise that doesn't necessarily drive innovation.
And that leaves us vulnerable to the emerging threats that you were so focused on.
How do you fix that? It wasn't my next question, but I'm dying to know your perspective on how you fix that human condition that has plagued the earth for hundreds of years.
Well, you know, I feel like my big challenge in the military, my big challenge in federal government, being an outsider, especially now looking in, is that the government isn't very good at being a meritocracy. Your best and brightest should be the ones that come back to teach. They don't need to come back and teach for 6 years because you need them back on the front line. But bring them back for a year, bring them back for 2 years, bring them back for 9 months. Give them a deployment.
They're worth too much in the private sector. They're worth too much in the private sector. And the way government does comp is not sufficiently innovative to resolve that. And I bet a bunch of them, if there wasn't a comp decision, would.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree.
It totally was. So I want to get to this innovation discussion around this blend between HUMINT and SIGINT. Because I think about those Cold Warrior congressmen who were in my seat, and probably when they got the briefings I got, it was a whole lot of HUMINT. And when we're talking about HUMINT, that's intelligence collected by a human being versus SIGINT, which is signals intelligence taken off of people's communications and laptops and emails and social media and all that. So we have lived through, based on our age, we're in this time of great transition where it was like almost all HUMINT. And SIGINT started eating more and more of that bandwidth. And there's been real criticism of that because there are some policymakers who say, look, HUMINT is a thing of the past. We got to go all in on SIGINT. That's all that's going to really matter. And this HUMINT stuff is for yesteryear. And there are others who say, well, without the HUMINT, there's nothing to build the SIGINT on, and there's no way to execute on it. So you're largely playing a video game at that point, not engaging in intelligence. And I'm just fascinated to know, based on the fact that you've been a part of this transition, where do you think it is? Where do you think it's going? And what's the right blend for the country?
Where it is, I think, is very much what you just said. It is in a place where everybody wants to automate. They want to automate because we're still in this world where we want more intelligence. We want more information. And the best way to get more information is to tap more phones, get into more networks, hijack more signals. But the problem is that in reality, all intelligence is HUMINT first. A human being is the one who creates the plan and the intention. A human being is the one who sets the precedent. A human being is the one who makes the decision. And then that human being communicates with other human beings over some kind of platform, whether that's a signals like a cell phone or an email, or they type it into a network. Very little new information, very little intelligence is actually derived without a human being at the center of it. Now, that doesn't mean that HUMINT tradecraft, where you go and physically meet with somebody and slip them money in a handshake and get their secrets and put it in code. It doesn't mean HUMINT tradecraft needs to be at the forefront, but we all need to understand that human beings are at the center of intelligence. So where it is on trying to automate the wrong thing. And more information does not make information better. What we need to give our policymakers is better information, better validated, better vetted, better corroborated information so the policymakers can make meaningful decisions. Where I think this is going is still unknown because our policymakers are being informed and being challenged and being criticized for things that have nothing to do with their actual job. They're being attacked for behavioral choices or verbiage from 10 years ago or all sorts of strange things that don't actually impact their ability to lead the nation today. And that's what we really need to be focused on. Where it needs to go, I think, is very much where I would like to see it go, where many of my peers would like to see it go, where all intelligence is enabling human intelligence, where we have SIGINT that enables humans, where we have MASINT that enables human, so that we can continually collect more and better human secrets through all sorts of different means of communication between multiple human beings.
See, that is the explanation that my former colleagues need. I'm passing your information along to send you up to testify before the Armed Services Committee. But let me put you on a spot. If you're a resource allocator, right, and the full intelligence resource bucket is X, today in 2025, what allocation out of that bucket, what percentage would you utilize for SIGINT versus human? And honestly, after 8 years, I think that's about 80-20 on the SIGINT side right now, but would be fascinated on your perspective.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, this is where it gets to be like financially bean counter-ish. I would agree with you overall. Generally speaking, if you got 100% of a bucket, 80% of that bucket is being sent for digital collection. 20% is being sent for human collection. That said, signals intelligence collection is a lot more expensive than human intelligence collection, right? Like sending a dude to Rome to treat somebody to lunch so they can steal some secrets isn't nearly as expensive as launching a satellite that has to, collect intelligence 24/7. That said,
but on a per capita basis, that satellite's going to be arguably more efficacious.
Correct. But the problem is technology changes so fast. And when we go back to the idea of enabling the human collector, we need to look at a way to expand or invest in more human intelligence operations so that we can continually be ready for the emerging threat instead of always chasing the threat that we found yesterday.
And no question, during the global war on terror, we got body checked on human. Our deprivation of that resource as a nation was kind of exposed when the adversary went to a very low tech posture for evasion. And now, obviously, the pacing threat is China, where they have had generational progress on SIGINT. You've given commentary on your YouTube channel, which is just terrific, about the revolving door and how that impacts policy as well. This is one of my main criticisms of Congress and of the Department of Defense, that the decisions are often made because somebody is trying to hook up a buddy who has recently left, as opposed to making the decision that would be best for the warfighter or for the intelligence collector. And it is sickening. And the only reason we don't have stronger laws against people getting out of government service and then profiting off of that service by getting the government to take a suboptimal path is because all sides do it. It's like an expected annuity plan that you could walk out of Congress and become a lobbyist or a registered foreign agent. It's an expected annuity if you leave the CIA, that you can go be a contractor for the highest bidder, and that's the way you're going to take care of your family. And so share with my audience your perspective on how the revolving door has impacted the CIA.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right, Matt, and it's such a pit of vipers because it makes it so that the second half, the latter half of your career, when you should be focused the most on impact because you're in a position of authority and leadership, instead you're thinking about, what do I do when I leave? Is Booz Allen going to offer me more, or is Khaki going to offer me more, or is Raytheon going to offer me more? And then when you leave, your job is not necessarily to help make things better. Your job is just to win contract deals with your buddies who are still in so that they can get their annuity plan when they leave as well. And that's essentially how many senior officers justify their senior career, because they know, oh, I'm only making $170,000 now, but as soon as I leave, I'll be able to double or triple that for half as much work just by sending work backwards. It's the same.
And so then the people who build our planes and ships and spacecraft, they have to make a bet on which buddy hire is the best hire. Like, one of the most important corporate decisions they'll make is which retiring admiral, which retiring deputy director of the CIA do I go hire that I know everybody there likes them.
Yep.
And if you prevail on that question and your tech is not as good or as survivable or as lethal or as, then you still win in the United States of America, and it erodes the meritocracy. To your point earlier, like, I have seen examples of stuff getting built that should never have been built, that was only built because the right admiral in the Navy left. Like, have you seen those examples in Intel, and how does that present?
Yeah, it presents itself in Intel a little bit differently because we're not, oftentimes when you're talking about military, you're talking about long-term projects, whereas in intelligence, it's short-term projects. So somebody comes out and they get a contract, and all of a sudden, a flood of people go into a very niche area that is relevant and important to the current administration or the current policymakers, but doesn't have long-term beneficial impact on the United States. A fantastic example of this is what we've seen happen really in just the last 2 or 3 years of the Biden administration. You saw how ill-prepared we were for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. You saw how wrong we were about Russia's power as it invaded Ukraine. You saw how wrong we were about Hamas's capabilities and Iran's capabilities to leverage long-term conflict with Israel. Like, how many places do we have to be wrong? And in each of those cases, we theoretically had some kind of team that was a group of specialists that had been awarded a contract to prepare for exactly that event. It's because the people who were winning those contracts, they weren't really focused on the mission and preparing us for the mission. They were focused on getting a contract that was based on buzzwords so that they could make sure that they maximize their benefit to the company that they were working for, and so that their buddies could get handed their opportunity to become the next ones to make sure that they identified the programs of tomorrow. So we knew these threats were coming, and we were not prepared for them. When you amplify that over the future of China and the future of Iran and the future of offensive cyber operations, when you start to think about what Turkey did in Syria, how many of our friends are actually our enemies and we don't even realize it, right? It starts to become a mind-boggling threat landscape that we are very ill prepared for.
Oh, there's no question about it. So if that's the why, I would love to know the what on the failures, because you just detailed a few of them. But during kind of our era of life, right? What do you think has been the biggest error of the IC, of the intelligence community?
The intelligence community has become a professional organization instead of a national security focused mission first. We're so focused now on who's getting the right review at the end of the year, who's getting promoted, who's qualified, who isn't, who needs career broadening. Like, people are treating the government like you're supposed to be a government careerist. When the American government was created by our forefathers, you were never supposed to be a careerist. You were supposed to contribute. You were supposed to be a public servant, which meant that you did something meaningful outside and then you served your government for a period of time before you went back to the outside. And then that bouncing back and forth always kept the government at the same pace as commercial industry. Well, once we started professionalizing our internal services, now all of a sudden people have to make the choice between what's the right thing to say versus what's the career benefiting thing to say. And I can't tell you how many times I ran into anything from junior officers to senior ranking officers who were struggling through the decision of, do I do the right thing for the country or do I do the right thing for my career? Because if I climb in my career high enough, I can change it from inside. And that never works.
Hey, listen up. The April 15th tax deadline, it's coming fast. Do you have unfiled tax returns? Can't pay the IRS? The IRS is more aggressive than ever. And the longer you wait, the worse this is going to get. Wage garnishments, bank levies, even property seizures are on the table. You need to get ahead of this, and you need to do it right now. But going up against the IRS alone, that is a huge mistake. Take my advice, call the experts at Tax Network USA. They know the system. They have an edge. They even have a preferred direct line to the IRS. They do this all the time, so they know which agents to deal with, and perhaps just as important, which ones to avoid. So whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, their genius strategies are going to be designed to help quickly settle your tax problems in your favor. Tax Networks USA's attorneys and negotiators have already resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. Tax Network USA can help you too, but you've got to move fast. April 15th is almost here. Talk with one of their strategists today. It's totally free. And you need to stop looking over your shoulder and get this put behind you. Call Tax Network USA at 1-800-958-1000. That's 1-800-958-1000 or tnusa.com/Matt. Hey, bro, that is one thing we have in common, because in Congress, I saw a whole hell of a lot of that too, where it was not that people did not know the right decision for the country. It's that they didn't please the right lobbying group or the right donor or the right special interest or the right person in leadership who could give them a prized committee assignment or a chairmanship or an introduction to a lobbyist. Like that's what House of Cards got right, was the amount of people's time in Congress that they deployed to their personal advancement rather than the projects that improve the lives of constituents or the ultimate direction of the country. But it sounds like the path, if the two options we have is go back and forth with private industry, where it's just about, do you maintain enough buddies to be enough of a valuable special interest to profit off the revolving door, or you just become a wage cuck through the professionalized service where you're not even available to have the agency to push back against the people ahead of you, because you need to be in a posture to have their job in 3 years or 5 years and hit your pension vest. So on something as important as intelligence, do we just need to turn it all over to the fucking robots and let them tell us what's going on, or how do we fix that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that we're at a precipice now where we can really start thinking about creative ways to fix that. Because I do believe that there is a way that we can blend American public service with American private activity. There's plenty of instances where we have seen that the government has grown exponentially because of the developments that happen in the private sector. And we've also seen where the private sector has taken off because of innovation that's happened on the government side. So there's no reason to think that we can't find a way to blend the two. As an example, secrecy agreements and the contractual obligations that exist whenever you're a private sector person working on a public sector project, that's a perfect example of how you can use the judicial branch to protect executive branch activity with the private sector, and everybody benefits. The government gets the benefits of innovation, the private sector gets the benefits of a guaranteed payer from the government, and then the nation benefits because all of it is contributing to our economy simultaneously. It's not.
So all we have to have is a justice system that isn't corrupt and it can cure all, huh?
And that becomes a challenge.
Yeah.
It becomes a challenge.
That's its own podcast. Well, we're not doing that. We're doing it. I got too many cool intel questions to ask. And I do want to get your take on something we got going on just more in the news recently. This offer of buyouts to everyone in the CIA. I saw that and I just thought, well, hey, if I'm talking to Andrew, I have to ask you what you thought when you saw that news.
Yeah, I actually just made a video about it today, Matt, because first of all, I think Donald Trump and Elon Musk's projections of what they think will happen are vastly lower than what will actually happen. When you offer government employees, when you offer somebody who makes $75,000 or $80,000 a year, 8 months of severance, guaranteed pay for 8 months, to them, that's a windfall. So they think that they might only get 10% of people to take those resignation offers. They're going to get much more than that. At CIA,
is that good or bad?
I think it's both. It's good for the reason Donald Trump wants it to be good, because all the people who are just, twirling their thumbs and just in government because they're not good at anything else, all of those people will take the offer to get out, and that's good. But it's also bad because the people who have real talent are going to take a risk on themselves. They're going to say, hey, I might do better with a Google or a Salesforce or OpenAI, so I might leave and take my chances in the commercial sector because I see the people that I work with every day here, half of them don't really care about the mission. So you're going to lose both the very good and you're going to lose the very bad. So you have to have a plan in the future for how you're going to bring back the most talent.
We're going to be governed by the mids at the CIA.
I mean, I think that's going to happen
everywhere. That doesn't sound on average good.
No, it doesn't. I am not optimistic.
On balance, you think this was a bad idea?
I don't think so, because here's the thing, Matt. What both Radcliffe and Trump are doing very smartly is they're making it so that anybody can apply for early release, but not everybody's going to be accepted. So you might have some highly skilled, highly sensitive cyber operations or human intelligence people who say, hey, I'll voluntarily leave. But then somebody else is going to say, actually, you're critical infrastructure. You're not allowed to leave.
Okay,
But
so that's the meeting in the break room I want to be in.
exactly.
At the CIA, where it's like, well, Jimmy and Fred both went in and wanted to take the resignation packages, and you know what? They told Jimmy he could take it, but that Fred was good at his job, so he had to stay. He wasn't allowed to get a massive windfall to go start his business or take a risk and go build an AI bot.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well,
so
I
you actually could be limited in your escape from the CIA if you were too good. And actually it's not out of line with what Elon told me he was going to do. I mean, what's going to happen is these people are going to be given a great windfall opportunity, the ones they want to get rid of. Then they're going to be, like told that they need to leave. And then they're going to just see that their passwords don't work anymore. And it's what he did at Twitter when he bought it. And what I know is what we've been doing in the federal government hasn't been working.
Yeah.
Because when we govern by continuing resolution or omnibus spending bill, you vote on the funding of the whole government all at once. So there's no ability to tweeze through, like, this is worthwhile, this is a failure. And it's like, oh, well, if you don't vote for the whole thing, then you're against our troops and our veterans and the widows and the orphans. Or, you have to take another path. We talked about the big failures of the intel community, but there've also been some big wins. And I have a theory on Afghanistan, and I want you to push back if you disagree. I've been a critic of the Afghanistan war, but on the front end, the CIA actually won the great victory. When the CIA went in on the front end, they accomplished a number of pretty fantastic objectives in running the Taliban out of power. And then when you had the DoD roll in with this grand notion of nation building and the deployment of all this USAID money, and everybody was getting bribed and paid off in some phony government that we stood up and then started to believe our own lies that it was an actual government, that's where everything went to shit. But then on the front end, there was actually some really high-end effective intelligence work done by the CIA, and that it's probably wrong to conflate the overall Afghanistan failure with the failure of intelligence.
No, I actually agree with you very much there. CIA is very good at what they do. They're the premier intelligence agency in the world for a reason. Because when it comes to executing the intelligence mission, they do. But theirs is not a nation-building mission, neither is the DoD, right? CIA is not a government-building organization. That's not what they're supposed to do. If you think about it, espionage is all about secret theft and secret subterfuge and sabotage. All CIA is supposed to do is break shit. And they're very good at breaking shit. Breaking machines, breaking will, breaking backbones. Like they'll break anything you want them to break.
Governments rule over their people.
Yeah.
At times.
But what they don't do is they don't build. So
Right.
when the mission changed and new policy came in and started telling CIA to collect intelligence that had a building purpose, that's not something that CIA is good at, right? Let them continue to break, undermine, and sabotage. Don't try to make them the police force that verifies that your new president is doing what he's supposed to be doing. That's not what CIA is made for. You're not going to get the return on investment for human intelligence that you would get if you directed the same resources to go break something else, like the cartels or like the oligarchs in Russia, right? When you focus them on something distracting, don't be surprised when you don't get the return on investment you're expecting.
Yeah, and it wasn't what they were sent to do initially. And frankly, I don't know if the CIA was in charge, could they have done a better job at an Afghanistan rebuild? Probably not.
Right.
I don't think anybody was going to rebuild Afghanistan, but certainly the DoD seemed to do it in the bloodiest and most inefficient and corruptive ways. So it's hard to imagine, like if we'd have given it to the Postal Service, I'm not entirely sure they would have done a worse job than the DoD when it comes to the Afghanistan rebuild. But I view that initial wave as a victory of intel. And oftentimes it's the failures that commentators discuss, and it's the wins that you can't discuss. And, I've been briefed on a number of operations that we can't talk about, but where people did really effective stuff to stop otherwise really bad stuff. So outside of the envelope, obviously, of what we can't discuss, what would you say to people to inspire them that it is a virtuous career? And what win would you cite and say, look, you can be a part of the type of thing like this?
Yeah, my whole platform, everything I do with Everyday Spy is about a positive message for CIA, because there's so little out there that's being said that's positive. Because just like you said, Matt, your failures at CIA hit the front page of the news. Victories at CIA remain a secret forever. And that's the downside about secret operations. The men and women who work at CIA are some of the most heroic, intelligent, brave, mission-oriented people you can imagine. That is in large part why they won't be allowed to leave with the new resignation invitation, because they're so important, they're so valuable that they might say they want to leave, but it doesn't mean that they're going to get a yes or get a stamp of approval. When you look at the takedown of Osama bin Laden, that is a fantastic example of what CIA can do. There are countless examples of successful operations that are paramilitary operations that happened, in hostage rescue situations, in countering human trafficking and weapons trafficking. If you think about the Stuxnet sabotage of Iranian nuclear capabilities, these are fantastic examples of where intelligence led the way. And CIA was at the
Is it safe to say that Iran would have the bomb right now if not for the CIA?
I mean,
I think I can say that.
Yeah, I mean,
I would agree with that assessment.
If Iran has a bomb that we don't know about, it's because they're terrified CIA will find out and break their bomb.
Yeah, but I think those are great examples that you point to. One thing that's in the news now is this USAID purge, and I want to ask you the question in as broad a way as possible, because I think you know what I mean. But what do you think about that? The effort to shine a light on some of the excesses at USAID by Trump and Elon.
Yeah, so USAID is a tricky beast, because in one area strategically it's an incredibly useful organization. In our terminology, we talk about hard power and soft power. Hard power is everything that comes at the pointy end of the spear, right? That's your military, your intelligence, your satellites, and your space-based assets. The things that make people afraid, that's all hard power. Soft power is all the stuff that you do that gets you access and gets you influence without threatening anybody. And USAID...
Yeah, but China just uses bribe. Like, I want to critique that, because China shows up with a suitcase full of American dollars, right? Not their currency, not some local currency. They show up with American dollars and bribe people with millions. And we show up and say, well, don't worry, USAID is here. And so long as the local bakery celebrates Pride Month, we will ensure that they have initial investment, and you can all thank us for the ongoing operation of the local bakery.
Yeah, I'm not...
Like, is that really how we win the soft power battle, Andrew?
I'm not disagreeing with you that the way that we execute the soft power battle has been off kilter. Because how do you keep up with that? How do you...
But do you think USAID is effective at executing that battle?
I don't think many of the men and women at USAID think that they're effective in how they carry out that battle. I think the truth is that USAID is a meaningful organization that has been hampered by policy and by political ramifications and direction that doesn't actually benefit what the mission is that they know they have. How are you going to get starving people who have no access to medicine to care about pronouns? They're not, right? They care about making ends meet right now. They care about, rice and tapioca that they can give their child who's already suffering from dysentery. They don't care about anything else. So they will say yes to anything, including Chinese money or Nigerian money or Russian money or American money. So we didn't differentiate ourselves. All we did was we spent a lot of money doing very little because we couldn't follow through with the promises that our adversaries could promise.
If the linchpin of our soft power is the deployment of USAID, then we will undeniably lose the global power competition. Because as I see it right now, if you need upfront cash right now in a suitcase, the number one people who will give it to you is China.
Yeah.
And they do it all over Africa. If instead of the suitcase full of cash, what you need right now is preservation of your regime, Russia is the ideal partner. They will send, what's left of the reconstituted Wagner group or 200 dudes, to Venezuela or whatever to keep you in power. And we offer as a value proposition protection from your creditors.
Yeah.
Like if you owe a lot of money, if you need an IMF loan, if we are the best friend in the world if what you value is that. And I think the fact that that's the major value proposition is probably why we are losing in the new frontiers like Africa.
Yeah, we have not.
Am I overly reductive in that?
No, I don't think so at all. I think that the truth is that we have not been focused on future threats since probably 2003. We've been very focused on historic threats, on past threats. And what people don't realize is that when we turned our attention on the global war on terror and we put trillions of dollars into the global war on terror, everybody else in the world who wasn't participating in the global war on terror, they invested their trillions of dollars a different way. And
Bingo.
It grew in some other way where we didn't really have anything to show for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, we were taking the same hill from the Taliban for the fourth time while China was building islands in the South China Sea to control like where some of the major shipping goes. So who's the idiot?
Right.
We looked like the dead money at the table. And actually, this is a perfect segue into what I wanted to discuss next. You've given commentary that you believe World War III has already begun. And your argument, as I understand it, is that these different proxy battles that you see play out in the Middle East or with China kind of riling up Latin America to resist some of these migrant repatriations, it's all part of the same kind of big power competition. And I want you to elaborate on that, and then I want to offer my critique.
Yeah, absolutely. So major wars all look different than the previous war because war evolves over time. So what ends up happening is the lay people start to believe that the next war is going to look like an amplification of the last war instead of like something totally different. So when you think about World War II versus World War I, completely different styles of conflict, different weaponry, different tactics, different strategies. When you think about what happened with the rise of terrorism, it was completely different than the Cold War. So why would people think that World War III would look like an exacerbation of World War II with more nuclear weapons and more bombers and more invasions? It was never going to look that way. It was going to evolve. The ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, just last year released an official statement commenting on how unprecedented it is that multiple American adversaries have allied with each other with nothing else in common except for their adversarial relationship with the United States. That's what brings North Korea and Russia and Iran and China all together. And now, because of their adversarial relationship...
Well, that and sanctions, Andrew. I mean, shit, we kind of forced them together when we sanctioned all of them. When we tell like a bunch of major economies in the world that you can no longer get access to the rest of the world, then they start doing business with each other.
And the sanctions have existed since, 2001, the late 90s, we started sanctioning these countries. But I don't disagree with you. They woke up. As they turned more authoritarian, their authoritarian leaders woke up to the fact that, hey, if we can't do business with the West, we can do business with everyone else. And the West never woke up to the fact that when everyone else does business together, they actually create a larger base of money circulation than when you just play nicely with your peers. The 1950s era model of how the United States dominated Europe economically and then forced Europe to take loans from the United States and made them dependent on American military technology, that strategy was very effective for about 40 years. But now it's much less effective, and we haven't changed our overarching strategy for how we prosecute American power and American will over the rest of the world. And don't get me wrong, American primacy is absolutely what I believe the world needs. There is no better leader out there than the United States. That doesn't mean the United States is perfect, but we're a hell of a lot better than the alternatives that are out there. But we're losing our own ability to do what we need to do because we keep subscribing to policies of the past.
Well, sure. In the early 2000s, it was a unipolar world. I don't think that right now, as we have an honest discussion in 2025, that we would say it is a unipolar world. I would say it's a bipolar world. And you did a good job of describing who's on what end of that. But I would cast it differently. I would say we have a number of conflicts going on now that are largely driven by people's normative, zero-sum nationalistic behavior, right? Russia made the decision to invade Ukraine because they felt encircled. Now, people will debate forever the propriety of the decisions that led them to be encircled. Certainly, you can't argue that it was effective deterrence. It used to be we have to encircle Russia for effective deterrence. Well, that didn't work. It didn't deter. So maybe it invited the attack. I don't know. And then you look at what China is definitely going to do in Taiwan, which is take it. And by the way, we're going to let them, because we would be playing an away game there and we would lose it over the skies of Taiwan. And so, that is going to resolve, I think, in that way, but not as part of some like larger global struggle, but just because that's a nationalistic tendency, and they view it as normative and zero sum. And so like the notion that there's some new world order of Xi and Kim Jong-un and Putin and the Ayatollah sitting around like together, it sometimes feels like threat construction to me. It sometimes feels like, why we've got to go give like another $1 trillion to the Pentagon. But you think that's what's happening?
No. I've never said that. Again, we are projecting World War III is going to look like World War II. World War II was Axis versus Allies. I've never once suggested that World War III is going to be like that at all. World War III just means that the world is in conflict.
So who do we fight in World War III?
Yeah,
China?
that's so again, I don't think we're fighting any one adversary. I think we have multiple adversaries that we're fighting, and our adversaries realize that they can execute multiple of their own objectives by cooperating with each other and maintaining a conflict with the West. And they're all degrading the level of threat that the West poses back to them by aggravating us simultaneously with other people in that adversarial group. We are less capable,
which we don't have. That becomes asymmetric because we don't have Blackwater to go and fight the Houthis in Yemen to preserve global shipping. We don't operate through proxies, allegedly, though one could argue in Ukraine we're kind of operating through a proxy. But where you have Wagner Group, or where the Chinese are able to send the little green men into Taiwan if they need to, what you're saying is other nations have as one of their assets plausible deniability, which we've deprived ourselves.
I mean, more or less, what I'm saying is that when it's not that different from the grade school recess field, right? The backyard in elementary school. When you're the big bully and everybody kowtows to you, it's good to be the bully. But once 3 or 4 of the other kids all get together and they pick up sticks and rocks and they start throwing rocks and hitting the bully with sticks, all of a sudden the bully is much less capable to take on all 4 of the other kids at one time. And that's what the world is realizing. The world is realizing that China can harass Taiwan by selling oil to the Russians and by continuing the Belt and Road Initiative in Africa. And Iran is realizing that they can prosecute missiles into Israel and they can continue to sponsor terrorism around the world if they export their agricultural goods to China and to North Korea. So you've got all of these different mixes of benefits and objective priorities that our adversaries get to prosecute simultaneously with each other without having any kind of formal alliance or allegiance to cooperate with one another, which is what existed during World War II.
I think you've largely achieved my objective in giving people a sense of how, on these questions that are driving how the country moves geopolitically, how someone from an operator and a policymaker would approach them. But I cannot resist the urge to ask you just a few tradecraft questions because everybody's going to want to know the answer. So as a lawyer who took a lot of depositions and examined a lot of witnesses, I developed what I called the human lie detector, where there are certain things with people's eyes, their body movements, how they shift, where you can have a very, very good sense of certainty as if someone's lying to you. Do you have like a few quick suggestions on that for people watching?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's tricky to try to assign simple behaviors, like simple movements, to multiple people, and I'm sure you saw that as an attorney too. It takes time to develop a baseline on each individual before you can develop their tells and their ticks. But one of the best ones out there is to look for chronology when you ask them a chronological based question. If you ask somebody a question that takes place in the past, you need to look to expect that their eyes will look up and to the left, because that is, in English language, that's how we read. We read from left to right. So when somebody is referencing, and they are an English speaker, if they're referencing their chronological history mentally, they should treat with their eyes, they should treat it like they're reading a story. They'll look back in time to come up with the idea. If they look up and to the right, then they're tapping into their creative side of their brain. They're not looking at their chronology. Instead, they're thinking of what can I say right now instead of what happened in the past.
Sometimes we got security briefings in Congress as to how to be less noticed so as to create less of a threat. And they taught us about the gray man theory, which is how you dress. You don't want to have things that get you noticed. If someone is trying to evade, you kind of go with the gray man theory. What's your best advice?
The gray man theory is very, very real because human beings are designed to look for things that they find threatening and things that they find attractive. So if you want to be a gray man, you need to make sure that you appear in no way like a threat, but also in no way like you're attractive. And that's what makes it so easy, because most people are trying to attract attention. So let all of those people try to attract attention, and you do everything you can to resist. Long sleeve pants, long sleeve shirts, drab colors, moderate grooming. These are ways that you can absolutely disappear and be forgotten, and people will never even know you were there.
This is why I didn't go into the CIA. I could not have possibly made myself not attractive. I want one last tradecraft question. If you're trying to extract information from someone in a conversation, what are some tricks to get to the information you want rather than getting the runaround?
Yeah, this it's such a great question.
We are in the golden age of America. President Trump is securing the border. He's got the ICE raids rolling. We're getting peace in the world. And here's the thing. If you want to go out there and slay, if you want the muscles, the energy, the riz to live your best life in America's golden age, then you want to visit our terrific new partner, Chalk. That's CHOQ.com. These guys have everything from supplements, testosterone boosters, pre-workout. And when you are able to get this full package, you want to do it with a subscription model, okay? You're not going to get this special deal on a one-time purchase. But if you use promo code FIREBRAND, you're going to get 17.76%. Well, that's 17.76% off your subscription orders. And the subscription is the way you're going to want to do it. So they've got the male vitality stack, and that is something you're going to have as part of your daily deal. So you don't want the one-time purchase on that. The subscription is key. My absolute favorite product that I use from Chalk, the Lit Powder. Okay, this stuff you can put in anything. The way Ginger whips it up for me, she works in a little almond milk, a little Greek yogurt, blends it up, and it is like the most delicious chocolate shake you ever had. It's rich, it's creamy, but with Chalk, you're not getting the additives, you're not getting the preservatives. It's terrific. And actually, on any other pre-workout you do, they've got that stuff in there. Chalk has got the Chad Mode pre-workout, and I'm adding at least an additional couple sets to every workout when I lock down the Chad Mode and get rolling on that. So go to chalk.com, that's CHOQ.com, enter promo code FIREBRAND. You're going to get 17.76% off your subscription order. Tell them Matt Gaetz sent you. You're going to be a stud. You're going to be an alpha. And you know what? If you're a lady and you think your guy could have a little extra pep in his step, this is a great gift. This is something that says, I care about you. They're going to love it. You can even make the lip powder the way Ginger does for your man. And you know what? Maybe there's even a leftist out there who needs a little bit of the energy supplements because they've gone beta. You will not be a beta with Chalk Mode.
One of the first things that we're taught at CIA is a method called RICE. And RICE is an acronym that helps you identify what motivates someone to talk. And the acronym stands for reward, ideology, coercion, or ego, RICE. Everybody is motivated by all four of those, but to different extents. So if you want to motivate someone to share a secret, or if you want to motivate someone to talk outside of school or share sensitive information, all you have to do is find out which of those four things motivates them the strongest, and then lean into that. If they're particularly religious, lean into the ideology of their religion. If they're reward-based, offer them a free cup of coffee or a new meal. How many people have given their parents' address over because they thought there might be a free cruise on the other side? You know what I'm saying? So people will give sensitive information all the time if you can align the question you're asking with one of those four core motivations.
Andrew Bustamante, you are a bright guy, a brave patriot, and a hell of a good hang on a podcast. I've enjoyed it. Do you have, before I let you go, do you have a question for me that I can answer?
So I want to know, Matt, now that you're seeing a change in administration and aggressive transformation in government, what do you see as the probability of us seeing real change in the next, say, 2 to 4 years?
Far higher than even on election day. And I was pretty hopeful for election day. But Trump has rolled in here with a sense that he's only got 4 years. He's not running for re-election, and he wants to make the changes to save the country. And I think he wants to go out as a transformational president for the positive. That's why you've seen the unleashing of Elon Musk. That's why you've seen the barrage of policy changes. And as someone now who's a commentator and a news host, just keeping up with it is exhausting because so much is happening every day to change stuff. And at the end of the day, the durability of that is going to be dependent on whether or not the Trump generation ushers in a generation into some of those middle manager positions that started out our discussion. And do those people get credentialed and experienced so that when future administrations on the right of our political spectrum are evaluating the credentialed talent, did it rise through an America First thinking of the world, or did it rise through some of the antiquated dogmas that I think we've critiqued and dispensed with?
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much, Matt, for having me. It was a fantastic time.
All right. Hey, how can people follow your stuff? Because it's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at everydayspy.com or on all social media platforms at everydayspy. And then if you want to follow me on YouTube or any of my podcast activities, you'll find the Everyday Spy podcast, the Andrew Bustamante channel on YouTube. And I will continue to be out there in the media doing what I can to support the mission.
Andrew Bustamante, thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you.